Hello everyone, a new year is upon us, and this time we're checking the balancers. All 4 tracks of them. Yeah, you heard correctly. Destiny said, well, you know how 3 tracks take a long time to edit and everything? No, we got 4. So let's talk about the balancers. You know, the squad that once they got released with the DLC, the internet called them mommy, and then when the Everdark version came out, everybody started calling their mommy because that stuff was a lot, and us doing 4 phases instead of 3, well, that's not the only surprise of the day, but we'll get there when we get there. Each phase is gonna get the full treatment, so an uninterrupted listening, a musical breakdown, then some lore sprinkled in between. Anyway, it's gonna be good. We have a lot of music to investigate today, so without further ado, let's check out the track for balancers, or in their official name, Weapon Bequeathed Harmonia. Oh, that's a cool variation on the theme. And ooh. The strings are a little gnarly. We have this Dance of Night. Using the sopranos a lot more. The female singers are so prominent here. And the bell. The process. Just a little symbol. That's such a high singing. Those chimes, that sounds so cool. Something about this. Just a small group of singers. And it starts exactly the way that it began, with this this dragging down of the pitch. I mean, it's different than what we've heard with Adele, just with emotional context. It is different. But there is something otherworldly about how vocals are used in this composition in particular, so I'm saying let's dive into it. My impression is that this phase is what happens when the fight begins, but before we get the, let's say, leading balancer kind of rezzing everyone up. So yeah, let's listen to it and see what we get. Just from this introduction, you know, the arena is so bright in the balancers fight. It's extremely bright, and it's very unusual. It's almost like there is no night where the balances are. They project so much light that they reject the night, even with Folgore. Though the arena is golden, the skyline is golden, you still get the sense that darkness encroaches, but you don't have that with the balancers, at least I don't think, which is very interesting. Now, the first things we get is high vocals. These high vocals I don't think are coincidental, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but we get those chimes as well. There is something highly graceful, angelic, almost, about the way that the balancers are presented. Let's check it out again. Now, what we also have is the toll of the bell, which traditionally in many Western pieces would be kind of a stand-in for destiny, if only because it's a very dominant sound, something that's very hard to ignore, and the highly metallic texture of that sound, it makes it feel like somebody's fate has been decided. It's a very powerful musical presence. Now, right after that, we're getting the entire female choir singing in unison. They're singing the same melody together, and that melody is being doubled by the strings. I think this is mainly here for contrast. Let's talk for a second about intros in music. Speaking very broadly, in music production, we usually see one of three main types of intros. The first type, no intro. In this type, we get straight to the point, no waiting time, just starting out the entire thing. In the second type, we have an intro that kind of gets the main accompaniment of the verse going before the verse begins. So when the verse begins, we mainly get the vocals added onto it. And the third type is there for contrast. In this type, once you know what your verse is going to sound like, you design an intro that would contrast it. This is very good at making the verse feel impactful when it comes in. Because again, our brain is looking for shifts in patterns. So again, the first type, no intro. Second type, familiar intro, which, repetition and variation and all that. And third type, we have the contrasting intro. The reason why I'm bringing it up is that obviously the name of this boss had an influence on the soundtrack. They could have developed the game and have a general design for the enemy, but not have its name finalized. I don't think there's even a chance that that happened here for a very simple reason. The female choir here are singing in unison. Just here at the beginning, they're singing the melody as one. But a few moments from now, every melodic line is going to be sung in harmony. The phenomenon that we refer to when we say harmony is when more than one note is happening at the same time. So when you're listening to it, try to see how it evolves from, let's say, a single line made by a Crayola kind of a thing, and how it moves to three different lines, as if you're holding all three Crayolas in your hand and they have a set distance between them. Then what we get is the Harmonia from the weapon Bequeathed, Harmonia. That's so cool. Still one. This dance of night, right, that we talked about in the other tracks. Still unison. Now we have the brass accompanying the line, taking it over. So what we had here is a small expansion. They're slowly starting to split up to be a bit more, let's say, varied in color. They start by splitting up to octaves. So the sopranos are taking the high note and the altos are taking the lower note. Same pitch, but they sing in a larger distance from one another rather than just singing unison. It makes it sound thicker, but it's not yet splitting into those three Criolas we talked about. I do remember it happening there in a second, so we'll see where it is. But another cool thing to take into account is this interesting variation on the larger hailstorm motif, the larger motif of the night, if you will. Check it out. So, da-dee-da-da. Obviously, that's very similar to da-dee-da-da-da. But here, they are moving the notes around so the emphasis and the waiting time is on different notes. Da-da-da. It just has this otherworldly magical feeling to it. Something that you could definitely hear, let's say, in some of the tracks from John Williams's Harry Potter soundtrack. Just something bright and graceful, but it's being contrasted by the lower strings that are kind of bubbling from beneath it, kind of overtaking it. Now we have something much more rhythmic. This is the moment in which they just not only split into three different Crayolas, but also you get this sense of breaking down of the rhythm. You have a pretty heavy triplet. Da, ka, ka, ka. Almost feels like a halting, a slowing down of the rhythm, which gives it so much gravitas. You know, it really makes you uneasy because the high singing as well, with this kind of slowing down, there is something unnatural about it. And so we have shifted from the supernatural, from the otherworldly, into the uncomfortable, the eerie, just like that, just by a basic rhythm being distorted. They're singing so high. Oh, just okay. So this moment is crazy. There is something almost religious about the way that this, coming down of the intensity, the way that it happens, almost Christian in its musicality. Still a harmony. And the bell. There is something very clean, very gentle about the design of the melody in the high vocals. And in contrast with that, not only do we have the gnarly brass, we also have in the lower strings this rhythmic pattern that taka 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 taka. And the notes they choose for that are highly dissonant. Now, not the most dissonant we've heard in the soundtrack, but it is relatively high dissonance when it comes to this particular track and the harmonic implication of this track. So when it comes to harmonic dissonance, I usually like to describe it in terms of spiciness. Spiciness can definitely be aesthetically too much, but it depends on its context. For example, when you take a bite out of your bowl of cereal, well, you're not expecting to be on an episode of Hot Ones. But here what we see is them just generally and slowly upping the level of spiciness. When compared to this type of religious music, yeah, we're pushing it a little bit beyond pepper, but still a bit more like chili than, let's say, a Carolina Reaper. I mean, that's why you guys are here, the music, the lore, the fact that this channel is hotter, so hot that it's not even on the Scoville scale. So now, when you're listening, try to pay special attention to the rhythm below the main melody. There are contrasting melodies beneath it that kind of drive the whole engine. To help you follow it, look for the line that sounds like da-dee-da-da-da-da, da-dee-dee-da-da-da. Oh, and they're finishing with such a harsh dissonance. Ending with this descending tone. So cool. So there's one more thing I want to draw our attention to. Here, after everything kind of dies down and you're left only with the choir, or at least mainly with the choir, listen well to how rhythmic this section of the music is. Just the strings and the vocals, while the vocals are being very rhythmic and the strings are creating such dissonance with them. I feel it's foreshadowing. It's true now we have the benefit of knowing what the Everdark form looks like, but here we get a little bit of hinting at this discord bubbling below the surface. Not yet visible to us, but we can feel it behind the scenes. This type of rhythmic chanting also feels to me like a little bit of a Norse galder, which is a chant, a musical spell of sorts, which is very cool. It's usually characterized by either a guttural throat singing or rhythmic chants, depends on where we're looking on male or female references. Now, these patterns of rhythmic chanting, they would usually be in Old Norse or in Faux Latin, which I definitely think carries that energy here. Also, this high soprano singing really makes it feel almost like a kulning, which is a herding song. I definitely butchered that pronunciation, by the way. I mean, sorry. It's a Norse herding technique. It doesn't sound like it per se, not all the way, but I feel like it's hinting at these directions, and I guess we'll see where it goes. So, that was phase one. It is definitely the shortest of all tracks within this particular video. But hey, it's not about how short you are, it's all about the pizzazz. So, all of my fellow manlets over there, don't worry about it. Listen, just have a personality. Trust me, it's worth it. And there ain't no better time to have a personality because look at the time. It's lore o'clock. This time for lore o'clock, I had a sense that I need a resident specialist. You see, this has Norse smell to it. Something here makes me feel like I need someone who understands Norse mythology better than I. And luckily, I have a friend. Contrary to what anybody said about me when I was in elementary school. Ha! So, on the first cameo here on the channel, the one, the only, Boris. Boris, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on.
For sure. I wouldn't have it any other way. So, before we dive into the subject of today, would you like to tell the good people in the audience, a little bit about yourself, what you're into, your channel?
So my name is Boris Dragosani. I have a YouTube channel. Don't watch my latest video, but my specialty is in Norse mythology and how it connects to Elden Ring. And I'm really, really interested in Norse mythology and how it pertains to not only the discussions from the character side, but also the world building and the events of the game and how it can be used to explain it.
Why not watch your latest video?
Because it is getting redone and remastered with the DLC in mind as we speak right now. So I'd watch out for that one in the future. But the video that's out right now is not only outdated, but was made on a HP laptop with a PowerPoint presentation style. I would not want to rewatch it myself. So
It's called Humble Beginnings, and all of y'all are more than recommended checking it out. Don't listen to him. That's a good channel to subscribe to when it's early on, and I know what he's working on right now, and it's definitely a good idea to subscribe. So if you're not gonna push it, I'ma push it.
I think they should follow my Steam and I'll carry them on Nightreign instead. How about that?
We do not talk about the great losing streak of September 2025, okay? We don't do that.
Why don't you tell them how you were the anchor to my ship?
For hearing this hidden lore of the ridiculousness that is us playing Nightreign, I might post like a video on YouTube for members or Patreon or whatever. Today, we're going to be talking about the Balancers.
Ooh, my favorite.
Why so?
I think that as it pertains to Nightreign, the Balancers are the most obviously Norse-inspired Nightfarers or Night Lords, sorry, in the game. And I think that their Norse comparisons are so strong, especially in regards to the text and the material that's presented.
That's really interesting. So we'll go over the expedition description and you'll take us from there?
Absolutely.
Okay. 7 Valkyries clad in white armor. These servants of the heavens restore the balance of the world by wielding heroic weapons that purify chaos. But even heroines must one day sleep, so why not retire early to the annals of history? This is a very cheeky description for an expedition.
Absolutely.
But I guess the best place to start would be the point in which we coincide with Norse mythology. And I should ask you then, who are the Valkyries?
Before I start talking about anything Norse, I've got to say Norse mythology is an extremely open-ended mythology. There's not a lot of source material, so anything I say about Norse mythology could be taken and interpreted a different way. However, because we're talking about the Valkyries, there's actually a lot of text material to go over. The Valkyries were an extremely well documented part of Norse mythology and of the old pagan religions. So I can talk about a lot. But I think when discussing the Valkyries, it's important to understand the fictional world of Norse mythology and where the Valkyries fit into that. In Norse mythology, there are 4 different afterlives, depending on not just your being, but also your intention and how you died. So there's Alfheim, which is the afterlife for elves, and it's also the residing place of the elves, which are also called Numen. Fun little fact. Then there is Helheim, which is a realm within Niflheim. It's ruled by a goddess named Hel, and this is where people who are undeserving of a proper death and a proper afterlife go. So people who die in their sleep, or die of sickness and disease, or die as criminals. And as it pertains to us, the most important realm is that of Asgard. Asgard is the afterlife for dead warriors. If you die in battle, regardless of if you were a trained warrior or a farmer, as long as you died with a sword in hand fighting someone else, you would receive an afterlife into Asgard. And Asgard's divided primarily into 2 different places, that being the Hall of Valhalla and the Hall of Sestrumir. Valhalla is ruled by Odin, the eternal Allfather, and Sestrumir is ruled by Freya, the goddess of love and fertility. Within the world, Valkyries are a harvester of souls. The word Valkyrie literally means chooser of the slain. And as such, Valkyries bring the souls of the dead to Asgard, where Freya first picks half of the best souls to come into her hall, and Odin takes the remaining, so that at the end of days, these souls can be used to fight a war. The Valkyries themselves are not just choosers of the slain, they're also called the Odin maids or the wish maids. But more importantly for the video, they're also called spear maids or shield maids, sometimes shield goddesses. The Valkyries were adorned with capes that had feathers on them. They had large plate armor. They were usually depicted with a shield and a spear, although it was known that Valkyries could wield an axe or a hammer. And Valkyries themselves are not godlike beings, but near godlike beings. They're extremely powerful, only women who wage wars and fight with men, but primarily are the collectors of the dead.
Now, when you say the collectors of the dead, do you mean once somebody died, they kind of pick their soul up from the battlefield, or is it something else?
It depends on who you ask. That's a great question. I don't know if it's the best time to discuss it right now, but I can give you an idea that the phrase choosers of the slain has definitely been taken in 2 different interpretations within the game.
I guess we're keeping some things for unhinged speculation, so that's good.
As it stands, though, I think I should mention that the balancers, they are Valkyries. Within the game, the Valkyries have capes and cloaks, and they have feathered wings, which we would see. They wear armor. Primarily, all the Valkyries have a spear moveset, and then on top of their spears, they have 3 different weapon types, which is that of the spear, primary weapon, a hammer, and a halberd edge, which a halberd is just an axe head put onto the end of a spear. And although none of the Valkyries wield a shield, every single one of the Valkyries has a base moveset, which includes a guard counter, where they block with their shield and then counter thrust with a spear attack, which is exactly like the purpose of a shield was for a Valkyrie.
That's super cool. Are there any other coinciding aesthetic details that you have from their moveset? or like, something in their design?
Absolutely. The weakness of the balancers is sleep, which I think is a reference to two separate things. Firstly, Valkyries can only harvest the souls of people who died in battle. So if you die from sickness, or you die of old age, or more importantly, if you die asleep, a Valkyrie can't claim your soul. And in addition to that, but in the poem Sigurd's Fowl, there is a specific line which states that as a punishment for Valkyrie disobeying Odin, Odin put that Valkyrie to sleep for many years, and only a human hero could wake her from her slumber, which is exactly like what sleep does to the Valkyries in game. While the Valkyries are asleep, they cannot be woken up until we, a Nightfarer hero, come and wake them up by hitting them.
That's such a cool little attention to details. That's crazy.
Absolutely. The attention to detail on these bosses, from the designs of their capes to their stature, even in the base form, the Valkyries have a special grab attack where they grab the player, they thrust them up onto a pole and hang them, and then they plunge a spear into their abdomen. And this is, in my opinion, a very clear reference to Odin's hanging, where Odin hangs himself from Yggdrasil, and then he plunges a spear into his side so he can gain the wisdom of Yggdrasil and he can learn how to transcribe the runes of life. And of course, this makes sense because in Norse mythology, Odin is the leader of the Valkyries. He is the All Father, and they're called Odin's mates for a reason.
That's really cool. So you have both Odin and Freya having this common connection to the Valkyries. What is their connection to one another, though?
Once again, it depends on who you'd ask, but if you'd like, I can discuss where I think the two interpretations differ.
Of course. Well, what are the two interpretations if there are two main sects?
As it stands in Norse mythology, there are two general belief systems: that of the modern Christianized version, which would be something post 13th century, which incorporates a lot of new material and revisions and professional analysis, which would interpret the Valkyries more as angelic, almost deity like beings who collect souls, which is in stark contrast to the true Norse Valkyries, who were warriors first, not so much deities, but almost human beings with supernatural powers who would collect the souls of the dead in a far different way. And I think that this is perfectly reflected in game through the interpretation of the normal bouncers and the Everdark or the Salvation Standard Bearer version.
Okay, that's really interesting. So let's say when we're talking about the first version that is more Christianized, is more angelic in nature, if we're looking at that phase that was released before the Everdark event, if we're looking at that phase alone, why would you say that the balancers are there to begin with? What's their role in the story of Nightreign, in the world of Nightreign?
Well, the purpose of the Valkyries as that of harvesters of soul, regardless of interpretation, is because balance in the world is not just about the balance of one soul for another. It's about maintaining the balance of spiritual energy in the world. The Valkyries harvest warriors because a warrior's soul cannot go to hell, the afterlife for the damned and the accused, and therefore their soul lingers and festers. They become an undead thing. Famously, dead warriors can become Draugr if they're still obsessed with the war and they're still obsessed with fighting, or they can become things like revenants and wraiths. And in game, the Nightfarers themselves are warriors who, for the most part, refuse to put down the sword. Wilder's storyline, and more specifically, the two DLC characters, the Undertaker and the Scholar, both of their storylines are about prolonging their own life, about refusing to die. They are choosing to live in undeath, which makes them a ripe candidate to be collected by Valkyries. So the fact that the balancers are coming to collect us, and when we defeat them, it says that balance is disturbed, I'm pretty sure, would indicate that it was their intention to harvest Nightfares, that we have unnaturally changed the energy of the world, and it was our time to be harvested, and we rejected it in favor of something else.
That's so cool. So in a way, we as Nightfarers to begin with, we are an anomaly, a spike in the balance because we don't die like Draugr, for example. But in addition to that, the new Nightfarers are a particular problem when it comes to the balance because they just refuse to die on principle. So, in addition to the Dreglord being a thing, they are also kind of instigators of the event of the DLC.
They are absolutely 100% began the conflict. Valkyries seek out warriors. Warriors rarely seek out Valkyries. Warriors enter the battlefield, but it is a Valkyrie who chooses the slain. They choose who shall die in battle. So us approaching the Valkyries and the Valkyries coming to us in the battle, which is how they appear to us. They spontaneously appear out of thin air when you first begin the fight. It indicates that their intention was to harvest us, that they came for us, that we did not seek them, they sought us.
Yeah, in the regular version of the balancers, what do you make of the thing that happens mid-fight when one of them rises and she has this pink fabric overlay, flowery thing? What do you make of that design?
As I said, I think the OG balancers take a lot of inspiration from the more Christianized Norse mythology. And in the more Christianized Norse mythology, the Valkyries are perceived to have a leader that isn't Odin. Many scholars believe that Freya, the goddess of love, who I spoke about before, is the queen of the Valkyries. That in Norse mythology, Valkyries can rise from the dead. And we know in Norse mythology that Freya's power is that of rising the dead from their graves. Freya has a cloak of feathers, which turn into wings that she can use on herself to help her fly, given the interpretation. And the Valkyries have the same cloaks. And the Valkyries give Freya special treatment. She picks the best soldiers as they come to Asgard to be brought into her own army. And so I think that the one Valkyrie that rises up within that fight is a representation of Freya. That Valkyrie is the Valkyrie queen who shall rise and give birth or rebirth, I should say, to all of her siblings. This fits really, really well with Norse mythology too, not only because the new wings that the Valkyrie sprouts look like myrtle tree flowers, which are these pink trees which Freya is deeply closely associated with because of their what is it, symbolic representation of fertility and I'm going to say wisdom, if I remember off the top of my head, but also because Freya's purpose in the mythology is that of a necromancer. During Ragnarok, which is the Norse apocalypse, Freya chooses to collect the souls of the strongest warriors in all of Asgard, which she got from the Valkyries, and she revives them all, giving them new life so that they can fight a final battle in heaven, essentially, against an invading force, which is led by Loki and some giants. And a little sidetrack. This is exactly like Melania, the Scarlet Valkyrie, harvesting the soul of Radon, the strongest warrior in the lands between, so he can be revived by Mikola, who is a goddess of love and compelled affection, who will revive Radon in the afterlife, also known as the Lands of Shadow, where death, what's the word I'm looking for? Not dwells, I think it says it's washed ashore. Do you remember that, Daniel?
I'm pretty sure what the stone tablet says on the tower in the middle of the Shadowlands is where all manners of death are washed away to, or
Washed
no.
up. Yeah,
Oh
I know
yeah,
what
washed up, like you're like you're stuck on a shore, right? Like
yeah,
you're
yeah.
deserted. Yeah.
So the lands of shadow are a substitute for the Norse afterlife. It is where death resides. So Mikola reviving Radon in the afterlife to fight off an invading force, which in Ronnie's ending is led by Ronnie, the giant daughter of Radagon, fits with the mythology. You just have to substitute Melania for Valkyrie, Mikola for Freya, and then Ronnie for Loki, and Radon for the warriors of Asgard. It's a really simple conversion.
Where does that put Mesmer?
It's a great question. I think that would leave Mesmer as a substitute for Hel. This is Hel, the person, or sorry, the god, and not Hel, the land, like I spoke about before. The land was named after Hel, but in the mythology, Hel is a giant god with a half alive and half dead face who is tasked by Odin to cull the teeming dead within Hel. And specifically, Hel occupies a place called Nostrund. Nostrund, translation for that is roughly the corpse shore. It's where all manner of death that came from criminals and idolaters and rapists and murderers and just the scum of the human race come to. And it forms a giant mangled pile of corpses that's hundreds of feet high. And Hel, alongside her, I'm going to say accomplice, not companion, her accomplice Neathork, also known as the gnawing beast under Yggdrasil, or the beast who gnaws Yggdrasil's roots, serpent. The two of them consume the bodies of Nostrand and help to break it down so that the bodies can be processed and turned into an energy that Yggdrasil, the world tree, can absorb. I think that Mesmer, in this circumstance, has a half alive face when he's blessed with Marika's rune, and a half dead face when he removes the rune of life from his body. I believe that his entire purpose, which sent by Marika, was to cleanse the lands of shadow, to wage wars on her behalf. And cleansing is that. It is the death of the spirit. You burn away the body and the soul of someone. Therefore, you're creating an ash which would feed the Earth tree. It's the same story. It's also important to mention too that Nidhogg is based on tree spirits, and we find tree spirits all across the lands of shadow. There are, I think, 4 or 5 of them, and 2 of them reside in the Black Castle, which Mesmer is in.
Wait, so Nidhogg is the basis for the tree spirits? Like they're based on
Yes,
Nidhogg?
yes,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Wow, that's so interesting. I can't wait to talk with you about the Everdark phase because I feel like there is so much to discuss. We're gonna take a small kind of side quest to listen to the second phase, see what we make of it, and then Boris and I will be back and we're gonna discuss the Everdark version because it's a wowza. What? It's a wowza? It's a. Am I having a stroke? It's a it's a woozy. What's the turn of phrase? It's a.
It's a woozy.
No, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's a whoopee. What's the word?
I know what you're talking about. It's a doozy.
It's a doozy. Yes, yes. It's a wowza. Wow, that's a good. Okay, I won't. I'm not gonna blame you if you unsubscribe. But if you found that funny, hey, you know what to do. You hit that bell. You hit that bell hard, so they hear it all the way to Asgard. There you go. That's a segue. Let's hear that. Let's hear the second phase for the balancers. Let's go. Oh. Dance of Night is back. The harmony is very dominant. It constantly splits up and gets back to one. Oh, that's a cool break. So first we have the singular vocal doing it, then all of the brass and the choir are joining her. And again, the solo violin, this constant shifts between the ensemble and the singular. Ooh, and a fake out. Oh, that's beautiful. The melodic vocal line is so pure, but everything around it is this battlefield. That's cool. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's drama. Yeah, and that it goes back to the beginning. That's so cool. That's such a cool phase. I feel like it's building up on everything that it kind of established quickly in the first phase, but it still reserves this deeper nature of the Valkyries, it still reserves it under the surface. There is this constant pattern of things breaking out to be like a solo instrument, a solo line, and things coming together to be like a bigger texture. This is also reflected mechanically in the phase itself because you have this one Valkyrie, right? You have this one Freya that kind of raises the other ones, that kind of brings them back. Now, from this point where I paused, the track is mainly just looping back to the beginning, which is why I stopped where I did. In the original file, it seems like this track appears twice, and that's, I think, a mechanical thing, a game development thing. I don't think that there is much difference besides how the track begins. Okay, time for a deep dive. Let's check phase 2 out in depth. What we're having here is kind of a resolution of rhythm, and that is important. I do think that is important, not only because we hear more of the symbols, that dance of night, that dark waltz that is happening throughout the soundtrack in general. Most of it is usually counted with two groups of three. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what we get here is 3 4s. But Daniel, I hear you say. Dude, it's just math. What's the difference? 3 4s, 6 8s, it's all the same. In a way, perhaps, but try to think about it like that. In 6 8s, what we have is two groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. 1, 2. But in 3 4s, what we get is 3 groups of 2. So when we break down a 3 4s meter, it sounds like 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2. And the fact that we go for 3 4s here at the beginning just makes it feel slower. It makes it feel heavier, and it also makes it unique within how this track has been going so far. I mean, this thing goes so hard, I could easily make it into a beat with very little effort and it would slap. Don't believe me? Here we go. Now let's get back to this beginning and see what I mean when I'm saying I'm counting it as 3 groups of 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Just so smooth how they're moving into it. Notice how every time you think this drama is going to explode farther, well, about half of the times, it actually shrinks down. So this track is chock full of just fake outs. Moments in which you think there's going to be an expansion of the dynamics of the range, but there is a reduction. Yeah, I love it. Just the solo violin and the solo singer. And the brass are joining. You can sense how this one singer, this one Valkyrie, right, is so much more prominent here than she was in the previous track, because in the previous phase, we did not have Freya in the field. But now we do. And the fact that we do really changes the dynamic of how the music is kind of woven into the story. So it's definitely worth paying attention to the way in which these instruments, these singers, are moving between the group and the individual, and the group and the individual. Just a little stop does so much. You hear the instruments ringing in the space, and you give the space a note to play when you're shortening that type of note. See it again. Amazing. Here we can hear the lower strings kind of trying to, let's say, fight the vocals. So da 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 da, pa 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 da. Something that keeps rising up and is being crushed down every time that it rises, as if the Dreglord is what they're after, and it is bubbling and rising, and they quash it down whenever they can, but this isn't a fight that they're going to win. It's definitely very interesting to explore. Just listen for that line in the lower strings. Pa 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 pa. Just check it out. Oh, that's such a small detail, but it does so much. There is this small slowing down of the tempo, and it's emphasized by the strings playing short notes. Bop, bop, bop. Just a tiny slowing down before the rise. It does so much to insert a level of human interpretation into the music. You know, often when we compose for media, we forget to put in these moments of, let's say, off-grid behavior. Since our working tools are very much oriented to work on beat, we don't always remember to fully take advantage of time expression, of using the tempo as a matter of expression and kind of shift the timing of the piece so we can fully squeeze everything out of an emotional moment. Be on the lookout for that pum pum. The violin is just adding discord into it. Female soprano is immaculate. The melody is so clean. The strings under it. Oh, so if you remember, earlier in phase 1, I mentioned a herding technique called kulning, singing with very high vocals. This kind of a call to, lead the herd in the right direction. Using something that symbolizes it, especially in this particular version of the balancers, the one that is more Christianized, in which they're more angelic, they're leading the warriors' souls, they're lifting them to Valhalla. So using this herding call here, or at least an imitation of it, this isn't 100% the same, but it definitely evokes that repeating call. And they repeat it because they want us to notice it. Let's hear it again. So cool. This is also a beautiful portion of this track, just so memorable because of its repetition. This insistence on uplifting. Pa, 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 pa. It's so thematically appropriate for this specific interpretation of the Valkyries. Also, we said that there are 2 groups of 3 in the rhythm. Well, here the drums kind of skip the first group And then they emphasize the second group, which we've seen before in the soundtrack. It kind of surprises you, but it adds such a heaviness, such drama. You'll see what I mean. Just also combined with the metal hits, this movement of the melody, ta ti ta ti ta ti ta ti, it really feels like weaving, like tailoring, you know? And that makes me think of a story from Norse mythology in which you have like 12 Valkyries in one place around a loom before a great battle, and they're not weaving wool, they're weaving the fate of the warriors that they're going to kind of pick up from the battlefield. And they're using, and that's metal, okay? That is definitely, you know, third and fourth phase material. But instead of wool, they're using human entrails as threads and severed heads as weights. And within that poem, we have a really meaningful connection between Valkyries and sound or music. The poem describes the sounds of clashing swords, you know, like the cymbals, the metal cymbals in the track, while it's also describing the rhythmic beat of weaving, you know, the weaving of fate. Just like that melody. Da dee, da dee, da dee, da dee. Just so cool. And I don't know if they thought about it, but it's the first thing that popped into my head when I was listening to that because I was familiar with that story. It's just this cool connection. So, regardless of whether it's intentional, it doth worketh. Now we're tying it back to the beginning. That's where the loop starts. And we're back to that rhythmic singing. This stays true to the nature of this interpretation of the balancers through and through. It does hint that there is something beneath the surface, but it does not betray that information for a second, which makes it hit so much harder when you actually see the monstrosity that is the Everdark. Speaking of the Everdark version, I gotta bring Boris back. Boris is here with me, and it is time we talk about Everdark balancers. What the hell was that? What the hell was that? That was a spectacle, but also, good lord, they went all the way with that.
Yes, absolutely. The Salvation Standard Bearers are so opposed to the normal version of the Balancers. Their faces change, they become blood soaked, their movements change, become erratic and sporadic, almost crazy in their attacks and their flurries. They're far more versatile with their weapons, where they swing them all the way around their body. It's a different fight. They're almost different beings. And I think it's because the Ever Darker, the Salvation Standard Bearers version of the Balancers is taking more after the true Norse interpretation of a Valkyrie. Do you remember before when I said that Valkyries collect souls, right? That they are the choosers of the slain?
Yeah.
Well, the phrase choosers of the slain in the Norse text doesn't mean that they go to the battlefield and they pick and choose the dead souls that are on the ground and bring them up to Asgard. No, in the true Norse version, Valkyries kill men. Valkyries participate in war. Getting chosen by a Valkyrie means getting chosen to be killed on the battlefield. The Valkyries themselves in Norse mythology are not godlike beings. They're women who were given a purpose by Odin, bestowed upon them. They are to claim souls for Ragnarok. And so they're warriors first and angels second. They are kill men. They are blood soaked. They are enthralled in the violence of war. Really importantly, in the true North text, the Valkyries themselves can just come back to life whenever they want. It's seemingly sporadic. Their resurrection happens unbeknownst. In the normal Balancer version, the Balancer representing Freya has to come back before all of them can be revived. But in the Salvation Standard Bearers version, Valkyries just revive themselves whenever they can, which is probably a reference to the fact that the true Norse Valkyries have the blessing of Odin and the blessing of Freya, which allows them to come back whenever, regardless of who's there. Additionally, in the true Norse version, the Valkyries can't fly. The Valkyries have capes and they have caped wings on their bodies, but the wings aren't functional. They're more decorative, like a ship's sail on a pirate ship, telling people, "I am a pirate. This is what I intend to do." They're more a decorative piece than they are a functional piece. They don't fly. They just cover their bodies and stop blood from getting on themselves, which is why the Everdark version can't fly. When they want to do a grab attack, they just run at you. And also, they're far more practical when they hit the grab attack. There's no flashy Odin pose and puncturing you with the spear. They just slam the spear into you as quickly as they can, trying to kill you, sucking as much blood from your body as they can. It's also important to note that during that grab attack, they bring their heads right into your face and then right into your body, and their mouths are covered in blood, which is probably a reference to the fact that on multiple occasions, Valkyries in the Norse text are observed eating corpses after battle. That not only do they harvest souls, but they engage in almost a light cannibalism. Although to say that the Valkyries are just women would be disingenuous, to say the least, since Valkyries can be in the Norse text giants, they can be normal women, or they can be gods and the children of gods, like demigods. It's also important to note too that in the Everdark version, their fight begins with one of the Valkyries hurting themselves. The one Valkyrie pulls and twists its own neck to begin the fight and release blood. Blood sacrifices are a really important thing in Norse text, since Odin gives the blood sacrifice of his eye and the blood from his torso, which drips down into Yggdrasil so he can receive divine knowledge. And Freya's blood is what's used to bring people to the afterlife. Well, at least that's how Freya does it. She uses Sather magic based on her blood and her own right as a person, or as a god, I should say. But the Valkyries harm themselves, and I think that harming themselves is a reference to a poem in which a Valkyrie refuses to marry who Odin intended for her. She disobeys Odin and turns her back on him. And as recompense, this Valkyrie commits suicide and kills herself to show her devotion to Odin, that she feels so regretful at failing Odin and failing his intended divine purpose that she kills herself, which is similar again to Elden Ring, where Melania fails to kill Radon, so she kills herself on top of him and begins a scarlet bloom.
That is such a deep connection. I'm really surprised I'm not seeing more mentionings of it on the platform. I mean, I've been checking out lore videos for years now, and it's like a whole different lens to explore Elden Ring. So I can't wait for you to, go into your videos about it and kind of break the game apart. It's fascinating. But if we go back for a second for that violent, visceral version of the balancers, the salvation
Yes,
standard bearers. So, if we're looking at them in this fight, it's not only the fact that they are appearing to be mad and they scream, which audio wise is such a powerful contrast with their first silent version of the balancers fight. My question to you is, beyond the fact that the Valkyries have this, they claim souls and they take the warriors they choose by hand. They kill them so they can take their souls. My question to you is there a basis in the mythos for them behaving in a more feral way, even beyond that basic distinction?
absolutely. In the Norse text, Valkyries, or at least one Valkyrie, when she's done with a battle, she compares herself to that of a gore and blood-soaked raven who's feasting on a corpse. She reminisces about the fact that she is soaked in blood. She is soaked into the violence of it all. That in the heat of conflict, she's just become a filth in just violence and blood. And not just I guess the comparison also comes back to the eating of people, but it's more about the love of violence, the craving for violence, the emotion of it all. It's also important to mention too, the Raven comparison. The Everdark Balancers don't have capes, but their wings are more bird-like, which might be a reference to them becoming the blood-soaked, battle-strong ravens soaked in the blood and violence of the conquest. Also, in the mythology, Valkyries are found in different places, and depending on where they are and what they do, their behaviors seem different. Valkyries that live in Asgard alongside Odin are often perceived a little bit more regally, a little bit more angelic, a little bit more like a god or a deity, even though they are mortals and they are like infallible and they can be killed, they have to be resurrected. They're still a little bit more normal, but Valkyries who stay in Midgard, who stay with men, who lay with men, who choose to participate in Midgard and the affairs of men, they become savages. They take far more the tone of a shield maiden or a shield goddess. They are warriors first. They are soaked in the battlefield. They kill. They're constantly enthralled in war and battles. Like the battle cry itself, the blood curdling battle cry of the Valkyries is something that's mentioned in the Norse text. And it's important to mention that in game, when the Valkyries scream, they cause blood loss. It's a blood curdling scream as they charge at you, coming to claim your soul.
Oh my God, that it makes so much sense. So one thing I guess that I'm curious about, there is another part of that fight, the Everdark version, in which one of the Valkyries kind of emerges from a giant worm-like structure creature, and that creature is massive and it's thrashing around. Does that ring any bells from the mythos then?
Yes, even though it's a lesser interpretation, I think that this form of the Everdark Balancers is supposed to represent Needhorg. As I mentioned before, Needhorg is the serpent that gnaws the roots of Yggdrasil. But it's very important to mention that Needhorg isn't drawn like a traditional dragon or a traditional snake. He's often interpreted as a serpent with a head and two large, pronounced front limbs, and then two non existent or greatly reduced hind limbs. And as we see in game, the shape of the Valkyries takes exactly that. It is a long, I'm not going to say slender, but a long serpent like being with two large front arms and two small, little, dainty hind limbs, which are pretty adorable if you ask me. But I think that the reason why the Valkyries become Needhorg, why they take on his appearance, is because in a way, the Valkyries and Needhorg and Hel are all part of the balance of Norse mythology, that they are part of the traversal of the soul and of the maintenance of Yggdrasil. In the mythology, Nidhogg gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil and he consumes the bodies of the dead to help Yggdrasil. By gnawing its roots, it prevents Yggdrasil from growing too large and it calls off branches and seedlings of the tree that are damaged or uprooted or would have taken vital nutrients from Yggdrasil itself. It keeps Yggdrasil in check. And by eating the bodies of the dead, Nidhogg prevents Nostrand from getting over to hand. And it also allows for vital nutrients from Nostrand to enter the environment.
And Nostrand is the shore of corpses we've discussed
The
before,
corpse
right?
shore,
This.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's important to mention too that I think the Valkyries taking on the appearance of Nidhogg may be a meta story within the game itself. A big theme of the DLC is that of death. The two new Nightfarers are trying to prolong their life. The Balancers are a boss that's based on people who harvest the dead. And the other boss, the Dreadlord, he's a bit interesting. The Dreadlord is described as a amalgamation of corpses who have been mashed together, and it has somehow taken life. And it's angry and hateful and evil, which sounds like a living version of the corpse shore, Nostrand. To me, at least, I think that the Dreadlord is what happens when tree spirits and Valkyries and Mesmer aren't managing the teeming dead. That dead not brought into Erdtree burial collectivize since they can't die and they become swirling masses of hatred, just like the Dreadlord is.
Yeah, I mean, in that matter, it sounds like the Nightfarers themselves are kind of feeding this aggregate of defiance, of refusal, of hatred, of guilt. Something that seems to be like a closed loop of a purgatory that they're locked in. And all of this stagnation, all of this blood that has nowhere to go. I mean, the only thing it can do is rot. That's all it's capable of doing. And therefore, you have a bleeding boss and a rot boss in sequential order, right?
Absolutely. Another interesting tie with the Nightfarers themselves. Uh, you have to in game. kill the balancers before you can access the Dreglord, which to me, I think is kind of a demonstration that the balancers are trying to prevent us from getting to the Dreglord. In game, the Nightfarers are very, very similar to Draugr. They are warriors who refuse to die. And while when Draugr in human spirits who prolong their life too long die, they become part of Nostrand. They become a part of the Corpse Shore. In game, I think that the reason the Valkyries are trying to harvest the Nightfarers is because they're trying to prevent them from becoming a part of the Dreglord. That by taking their souls out of the equation, taking their bodies and bringing them up to heaven, or I guess what would probably be Erdtree burial in Elden Ring, they're stopping us from dying as Draugr and being brought down to the depths where Dreglord is and becoming a member of the Corpse Shore, as we are extremely powerful beings who would make a fine addition to that amalgamation of flesh, which would make it even more hateful and destructive in power.
It throws me in so many directions. So let's say we have this pattern that, if we connect it to the Norse mythology, really implies that the entirety of the Dreglord calamity is due to that never ending fight that the Nightfarers are having. The fact that they just continue this cycle so much that they slowly become a part of that shore, and the balancers, a mere reaction of that universe to the absolute descent into madness that the entire realm is going through. That's crazy. Even if it's a microcosm, even if it's a bubble universe, right? They want to help us not die and get to this version of Rostrand, which, by the way, sounds a lot like the arena in which you're fighting the Dreglord. It's interesting that all of the suffering within Nightreign is on different levels of our own making and our own prolonging.
Yeah, it is. You just said the chaos of it all. It's important to mention that I think the balancers, or remember, the relic recalls that they are opposed to chaos. And in Elden Ring, at least, chaos and the frenzied flame is born through suffering. That because individuals can't die, they can suffer eternally. And in this suffering and this anguish and this sadness, the frenzied flame takes hold. The chaos which consumes people. And so the fact that the Valkyries specifically oppose the chaos which comes from eternal life, and they also oppose the Dreglord, who is what happens when bodies eternally die, and not just souls, but the bodies themselves continue to eternally live and grow resentful and hateful. It shows that the Valkyries kind of play an important part as just that. They balance the game. They're preventing the evil and the atrocities of equilibrium, that being chaos, and of hate, that being of the Dreglord.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the relic description. So the item is called the Will of the Balancers. But when you look at the description, it says the will of the Harmonia left upon their defeat. The power of its namesake can be unlocked by performing a relic rite. A tiny farming village was besieged by bandits who proceeded to ravage both its plots and its people. A young village girl seeking help dashed into the forest, where she prayed to the statue of a protective deity that held a weapon raised overhead. By the end, the village was steeped in red and settled in silence. The village girl, drenched in blood, stood with a vacant stare and a heroic weapon in her grip. And there is so much here. I mean, beginning from the Harmonia, obviously this has some thematic connections to the idea of balance, but also it's a wink to the Ionia, the blooming of Millennia. And the story that they're telling, that's a very dark story. And before you tell me about how it connects to Norse mythology, there are things about this that already ring like Elden Ring, pun not intended. The protective deity that has a weapon overhead. I mean, this kind of sounds to me like either Marika when she's breaking the Elden Ring, or Radagon's pose when we begin the fight with him, when he's holding the weapon overhead. Where does that meet Norse mythology in your brain?
In my brain, I immediately go to the fact that Radagon is based on Thor from Norse mythology. And in the mythology, Thor is the protector of men. He is the guardian angel of humanity. He kills giants despite himself being a giant, and he worships and he does the bidding of Odin so he can help save men. He's trying to prevent Ragnarok with Odin to save humanity. So the fact that it specifically says that the girls pray to a statue of a protective deity with a weapon overhead would indicate to me that they were praying to a statue of Thor or of Radagon in this case. But that wouldn't align with Norse mythology because in Norse mythology, Valkyries get their weapons and their power from Odin and Freya, and Radagon isn't based on Odin or Freya. But it's important to remember that Radagon is Marika, and Marika is based on Odin, the All Father, the eternal God, which probably means that this girl prayed to a statue of Radagon, and Marika answered and bestowed upon her a weapon, a spear. She may have even had that spear forged by a smith like Hugh, who she has under her thumb.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from, but this story, I mean, something about it resonates kind of similarly to Marika's implied story from the Shadowlands, from the DLC of the original game, because here you have this young girl, she's seeking help, and her village is being absolutely ransacked, and she just wants to have the power to deal with what's happening. But even though she got that power, when she came back, there was nobody left to save. So there was only the kind of casting of vengeance. So if, let's say, that child in the story prayed to Marika, or to Radagon and Marika answered, it would make sense why Marika would answer. This is a parallel that's extremely close. I've never looked at it like that before. I've read that text and I've never considered that before.
You really need that Norse mythology background to pick up on a couple of these little things. But as it pertains to Marika and her story in the Shadowlands, I absolutely agree. It does parallel the balancer story of a woman choosing to settle the score herself to gain power enough to break the cycle, but realizing that breaking the cycle does nothing for her. She's the only one who can bask in her own glory. It's quite lonely if you think about it. At least the balancers have each other, but Marika only has Radagon to share with, and Radagon isn't really interested in what Marika wants anymore.
It says that the child stood there with a vacant stare and a heroic weapon. Now, these two things are very interesting because when you look at America, most characters in this scenario don't even have eyes, mind you, but a vacant stare, she's basically a statue at that point. It feels like the soul of America isn't there and hasn't been for a while, but this thing about the heroic weapon, this doesn't feel coincidental. Not only because, the hammer of Thor and stuff like that, the weapon that the balancers use, their spears, right? Because they're Valkyries. That is the spear maiden imagery and the axe and the shield, right? We discussed this in the previous phase. But whenever you say heroic, the hero, it is evocative of certain characters. It's evocative of specific characters in the story, and this seems like they're emphasizing Radagon again.
It is. I'm reminded of that stone pillar in the mountaintops of the giants, which says something to the effect of great champions clashed. And we know that Radagon is referred to as a great champion, right? He's the protector, the champion of the Erd Tree. Muriel calls him Great Champion Radagon. The one Red Wolf of Radagon is called the Red Wolf of the Champion. So the fact that it specifically mentions that it's a heroic weapon, that it's a weapon wielded by someone with heroism. They're viewing themselves as the righteous and ruly person of it. I think it's pretty on the nose to show maybe Radagon did give them their weapon. Maybe it differentiates from the mythology, but I couldn't tell you.
I mean, it is very interesting, and I think it's a very strong kind of tool to transform Norse mythology. Once you say, these two characters, what would happen if you couldn't tell them apart? What would happen if we question any time in which one of them has done something? Because it can also be attributed to another. And I mean, is there anything in the myth that kind of confuses and or blurs the line between Odin and Thor?
There is. There's a fair bit. More famously, there is a lot of confusion between Odin and Loki, but Wogar or Woden, depending on who you ask, is the basis for Odin. And in some of the Old Norse texts, they don't use the word Odin. They'll use the name Woden, Worgar, Woven. And in these texts, or I guess not texts, in these poems, these spoken poems, Wogar is wielding a hammer. Wogar is killing giants himself. Woden in some of these is he's fraternizing with human men, which those are not Odin-like tendencies. Those are very Thor-like tendencies. So it's been speculated that maybe some of the things we attribute to Thor, some of that humanity that we see in Thor might actually be Odin's traits that we've just personified onto Thor. This is just because Old Norse name for Thor, it's Thor, Thodin, Theoden. I've heard that's very uncommon, but Thor himself, the Old Norse name, it's very similar to Odin's name. And so, yeah, there is some confusion within the mythology about what parts are which. And that's where I said before that in the Christianized version, there's a lot left to interpretation. It's because of these discrepancies in the naming conventions where they're trying to figure out, oh, well, is this one character? Is this another character's actual actions?
This would be the best time, if any time, for just a touch, just a smidge of unhinged speculation. Because I do have a few things to bring to you. Now, I am well aware that the reading that you have of the story of Elden Ring goes much more in depth than that. And we do differ kind of in our weird ideas and interpretations. But something that I find really interesting from what you're saying is the whole idea of reading the different children of America, which is sort of inspired by Odin. Reading all of them as Valkyries is an interesting direction to look at. But what about Rani then? Because isn't Odin connected to ravens?
Yes, yes, he is. He has his two ravens, Hugin and Munin, who are thematically his eyes, but they observe the world and they report it back to Odin, so he doesn't have to go all across the nine realms to see everything. Right through his one eye, he can see the world because of Hugin and Munin, his ravens.
So, my question is, I guess, we also said that sometimes there is a blurring, a mix up between Odin and Loki, right?
I did, yes.
Okay, so the things that come from the community, even without the help of that knowledge, of questioning whether Ronnie is some plan for America to escape her godhood prison. The reason why I find it interesting is because, yeah, as you mentioned, the daughter of a giant who's part giant, but not only that, Odin is related to ravens. And ravens are what type of bird?
I assume you're going to say corvids, or
Also a carrion bird.
in a way, yes. Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
So I'm just saying, okay, if the ravens are the eyes of Odin, so you have these people that aren't stuck in the Erd tree who can actually see what's going on. So they kind of act as the eyes of America. And there's a premise for that with Gideon, right? Because Gideon can basically hear and see stuff in places where he has no business knowing about because of his beetles and, his cronies. Long story short, my thought is if we have the carrion, let's say, royalty and the idea of carrion birds, and then the idea of Ronnie, the one thing that kind of tickled my brain, you said anybody can become a Valkyrie, right? Doesn't matter if it's a giant, a human.
Yes, yeah.
There is only one faction I can think of in Elden Ring that would recruit to an elite force any race, and that is the Carrion Knights. Because you have giant Carrion Knights and you have regular people Carrion Knights.
And Albinorics, too.
Yep. So that is a really cool way to tie all of this together, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying we've unlocked something, but it's a really cool connection to look at. And the inspirations from Norse mythology, when the game came out, long before it came out, when they announced it, they said that Elden Ring was originally going to be called Old Rune or something like that, and that it was heavily based on Norse mythology. But then these leaks and rumors kind of died out. And when the game came out, people said, well, maybe it's more Celtic. And then we had other interpretations, of course, because obviously it has a lot of imagery. The entirety of Elden Ring isn't one mythology. But I find it fascinating how deep the connection goes and how useful Norse mythology is when you're trying to kind of break apart the artistic choices that they made. And I had no idea with the balancers that it goes so deep. It is so deeply woven into the game. It's really unbelievable.
Oh, it absolutely is. If you want to, and this is a teaser from my own video, but if you wanted to, you could read the story of Ragnarok from tip to tail. And if you substituted out Odin for Marika and Radagon for Thor and Loki for Ronnie, and then you had the more obscure takes like Mesmer for Hel, and you had Godwin substituted in for Balder, Radon separated in for the Warriors of Ragnarok, and a couple more small minor substitutions, Malekith for Fenrir, Rykard for Jormungandr. You can just retell the story of Ragnarok as if it were the Shattering. It's almost word for word. Even when we defeat Consort Radon in the afterlife, which, substituting Mikla for Freya and Spock in that fight, or on Spock in that fight, we'll end it by saying something to the effect of, become not a god for gods, become a leader for the men, become a leader for the tarnished. And that's exactly what happens in Norse mythology. That when Ragnarok is over, and spoiler alert, everyone dies in Ragnarok, or mostly everyone dies in Ragnarok.
If anybody complains in the comments section, I swear to God, it's been how long it's been?
Couple thousand years almost.
That's enough. That's long enough. Okay. Yeah, we can okay. Disclaimer taken care of. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the end of the story, it is men who take over the world. That there's no more gods left to pray to, and therefore it is left a barren waste for men, a land ruled by men and not by gods, which is exactly what we become when we beat the game. We are a man. We don't rise to godhood. We rise to lordship beside someone who isn't a god. In the Frenzied Flame ending, sure, the Flame of Frenzy is a god, but Ronnie doesn't use the Gate of Divinity, so she isn't a god by her own right. And Marika is a shell, a dead thing. She's not a god either. So we rise as a lord, not for gods, but for men, just like in Norse mythology.
I can't imagine anything better to send us off into listening to the third phase, which is the Everdark phase for the balancers. But before we dive into it, I have to say, Boris, thank you so much for coming to this crazy video. I mean, I would never pick up on this treasure trove of analysis. I told you guys. I told you guys. It was a good idea. It was a good. I can't speak anymore. But it was a good idea. But yeah, man, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, I definitely recommend checking out his channel. He might be all humble about it, but I know what's coming on that channel, and I think you'd like to be there when it happens. So yeah.
No, thank you so much for having me on, Daniel. It was an absolute blast. I'm so happy to talk about Norse mythology and Elden Ring to something that isn't a brick wall. It's kind of nice.
I mean, listen, better a brick wall rather than a padded room. But I agree. I agree. And I have a feeling that this will not be your last cameo on this channel, I think.
I hope not.
I'm pretty sure. But yeah, everyone, before we dive into phase 3 and some musical analysis, feel free to go and show him some love on his channel. And let's go to the freaking terrifying trauma, the body horror, the breaking down of the psyche of the 3.5-meter tall fan mummies that they decided to destroy the internet with. How about that?
Sounds like a good idea to me, man.
Without further ado, phase 3. Let's go. What was that? There's something in the back. Melody is very much a unison. Whispering. Oh, that's so creepy. the whispering moves from side to side. But the slowing down of the tempo. Again, this talking, like this rhythmic chanting, but it's unhinged. Ugh. There's something nasty about how this dance is moving. You can feel how something beautiful and delicate is just corrupted. Vocals are gone, the singing is gone. Now it's back. But it's buried, the strings are really taking over. Ugh. And just the non-stop whispering. There's something so... I don't think I've been this tense and uneasy on this channel before. Like, there is something really uncomfortable with the way that this runs. Let's not delay. Let's just jump straight in for the deep dive. So already we have solo string lines here trying to rise, trying to kind of develop an identity, but the noise is just overwhelming. It just takes them out, completely snuffs them out. Now, that noise sounds to me like it's made of like string scratching with the bow and a delay effect to kind of make it more psychotic. And some of that whispering color that we're gonna hear a lot of in this track, it's just... I think they're trying to put us in the shoes of the Valkyries themselves. You know, in the way in which they stay longer in the realm of men, and therefore they get corrupted, they get absolutely distorted, they go crazy in a way. And this madness is whispering in their ear. It's so effective. So throughout the entire beginning, you can hear something in the back, but it's not really coherent. You can't really tell that it's whispering. You see, even in the first listening, I was confused about what the heck am I listening to. It comes and goes. It's like scratching chalkboard, scratching metal, the sound of dragging. It's so uncomfortable. Also, the way that the strings move here kind of feels like they're emulating the sound of a keyed fiddle, a Nyckelharpa. It feels very unstable. It has to be intentional. The string section is a highly homogeneous and stable section of the orchestra. This level of dynamic uncertainty is usually saved for, let's say, instruments in which you have to divide your bow between different strings, so you can't keep a stable level throughout the entire playing. And if I remember correctly, I do think a Nyckelharpa is kind of a familiar instrument to the world of Norse music. Definitely a fascinating usage of it. Something tragic about this melody. Dance of Night is back. strings are so dominant in this track. If you think about it, the choir up until now was much more dominant than the strings. The strings will try to undercut them, they will try to fight them, but the choir, for the most part, was a pretty consistent element. We don't get the choir singing here, at least not dominantly. You get whispers, but what we get from the strings is this forming, this shaping up of a threat. And just like that, as this threat is rising, is taking form, you can really tell that it loses its stability. It is the battlefield, it is the madness that infects them in the realm of men. Also, we hear the slowing down of the tempo again. It's a very useful technique, and the fact that they present it again is just a linking line between this version of the boss and the previous version that we've had with the balancers. Just these little things that they have in common, so they're not just different creatures altogether. There is something here that was present before. It just was a lot less dominant. And how dominant it is going to be very clear because, well, right after this slowing down, we have an absolute explosion in the music. And the whispering just goes on. Shaking breaths. Just so much dissonance from the violin. This line, okay, this is where they completely lost it. So you have this horrifying, uncanny version of a melody, of a violin melody, and all of it is out of whack. It just descends and disintegrates. It's horrifying to see. It's like a skinwalker, which makes so much sense considering the fact that they look uncanny and horrifying in this phase, and they shamble around just completely different from what we experienced them as so far. So when this violin line is kind of crumbling into itself, at the same time that they are kind of shambling in the desert and screaming at you, this is the type of thing that's bound to make you uneasy. They really outdid themselves with this fight. This is going hard. This is a relatively high level of horror and dissonance in their music. Just see how horrifying and deformed this is, and I think a part of what makes it so is how frail that violin line is. It goes from slender and fragile to Slender Man real fast. It's also... Oh! We have a unison again. Barely any choir. This is a little similar to Hamster's theme. And now, there was a moment of vocals there. There's a layer of a soprano singer in there, and they blend it in and out all the time. I imagine they recorded both the violin and the singer, and they just dynamically shift the volume between them, as if the singer is really trying to break through, but the violin, which is blood here, I feel, it is this blood curdling movement, it completely took over. And what we get here is just horrifying. Just his runs are moving between the different strings. Even that ending portion, this pseudo quartet sound, we have heard that sound before in Hailstorm's theme. We've heard it, this type of orchestration, but here it kind of looks like a broken simulacrum of itself. Imagine something that is fundamentally alien, it isn't human, and it's trying to act like one, and it shows. You know, like Mark Zuckerberg at Congress. You don't quite know why, but something feels off. And the whispering, bro. Yeah, that's absolutely insane. Or, in the words of an ancient Norse poem, thank you, I hate it. Phase number 4 is probably activated by the appearance of the huge worm, Nidhogg kind of beast. And the scale of the battle grows significantly. I imagine it happens the same with the soundtrack. So without further ado, this is the second phase of the Everdark and the fourth phase of the weapon Bequeathed Harmonia. Oh, it's so bad. Why? Such a mess with the length of the phrase. Where are the emphasis? There's this marching of war within it. And the singing is buried. It's buried. So chaotic. You have whisperings on the strings this time. It's a reference to the... That's from the second phase, I think. That's so cool. That's insane. Out of tune moments. It ends so in such an unsettling way. This phase started with the quartet sound kind of managing to rise out of his, uncanny valley skinwalker phase and kind of find its voice, only to explode into a chaotic battlefield. And how it ends is this movement in octaves that is just unstable enough pitch-wise to tell you that there's something wrong. There is this version of as above, so below here that doesn't quite sit, which really, honestly, is probably very true to the nature of balance and what the balancers are. You see, they do manage at the end to kind of equalize the battlefield, but not fully. They're not capable of balancing it out fully because there is a problem in the plan, and the problem is us. We refuse to die, then you, Nightfarers, refuse to die, the Dreglord refuses to stop kind of rising from the rot. So something about this is, well, let's say balanced just for a second, but it's a very fragile balance indeed. Yeah, it's time for a deep dive. So already here, the meter is kind of all over the place. The melody is chaotic. It's moving like the giant serpent thingy. And because it's moving in that weird, uncanny, unnatural way, the meter as well is not dancing in the way that we have met it before. They managed to create something that's so horrifying it overtakes even the night. They have become a monstrous threat in their own right. I'm not sure I'm 100% correct, but let me try to count it again. Yeah, from what I'm able to count here, this is highly unstable, and you can count it on like 2 4s, right? You can count it as a march, and you'll be okay, you'll be correct, but this melody kind of makes sure to always end on a weird place. So you never feel comfortable about the rhythm, about reading it. This is one of these tricks that they've been using throughout the entire soundtrack, but here it's just very, very intentional how they create something that moves in an unnatural way. It is different than Folgore. Folgore had this, rhythmic pattern that was kind of leaning on 6/4s. It was leaning on this six-limbed centaur that was riding, but it had some consistency to it. It had continuity. This melody feels almost associative. It feels free from the bounds of what we comprehend and what we can categorize. So yeah, you could put it as 2/4s, but it's gonna feel weird. Now it's going on different 4s, a different tempo, with divisions of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Crazy. That's insane. And the whispering again. Good lord. I think this is my favorite part of the entire phase. It alludes to the second phase of the original Balancers fight, the regular one. We mentioned this rhythmic beat of weaving, da-dee, 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 da-dee. But here, instead of taking it slow, it does this squeezing of it. It happens faster. It happens with more intention. So if before what we had is the weaving of fate, right? We had this graceful, angelic, right? But weaving of the fate of the warriors. Here we have them claimed. This sounds like a battle call. This sounds like the kind of brass action that you get from, an army going to war. And you can hear how, with every clash of sword here, since it's happening faster, just it goes and it keeps increasing in intensity. It's so freaking cool. Also, again, this entire thing goes by the marching rhythm of an army going to war. Just one, two, one, two. And it also makes you feel kind of like they're closing in on you. It's moving all that much faster. The units to which the music is divided, they matter a lot. So if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. But here you have ta-da, 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 ta-da. It's just punching you in the face. It's going so fast. Their movement is erratic. They're definitely a terrifying fight. I am shocked how well this fight was made. I do think it's perhaps the best spectacle fight that they have made within, definitely within Nightreign. But it's one of their top spectacle scenic fights that actually keep retaining their mechanical nature. For example, with Rykard, he's a giant snake. You use a specific weapon to hit him. Like, for the spectacle, they change how you engage with the fight. But here, for the most part, they give you a spectacle that is mechanically coherent or similar without, having the Maris problem. I do think that spectacle-wise, it even surpasses the Dreadlord, although it is also a top-notch spectacle fight. You can tell that they gave a lot of thought into how they're going to utilize the space, the arena, and how they're going to use anything that's in it and the framing. The camera also does a better job than usual to kind of handle this size in scale between you and that huge flower Nidhogg adjacent thingy. Yeah, it's definitely quite something. Pop, 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 pop. Here, the vocals and the strings are kind of used together to create this kind of a vibrating, wailing sound. This scream, this shriek. It is aggressive. Oh. Just the pitch deviations. It feels so wrong. Now, this absolutely fragile, just fragile little balance, whatever is remaining of it, it really is unusual, isn't it? It's something, it's hard to describe. Just, you have the entire balance that they worked, lived, and died to preserve is hanging by a thread. And we just cut that thread. That's a powerful note to end on. Pardon the pun. But yeah, I'm heavily impressed by this track, and I love it. By the way, all 4 phases, the usual kind of reaction from me. I love them so much more now that I've done the deep dive. Some of them, obviously, more than others. I think that the second phase and the 4th phase are my favorite when it comes to composition information within them, while the first and the second are very setting establishing. I think they're great at that. I think they are better at that than the second and the 4th. So they have a good balance going on between setting up the scene and setting up the right emotion to strike you with when the imagery is revealed to you. And the more emotional storytelling part on the second phase of each version of the fight, you get a different kind of reading for what the Valkyries symbolize and how they are symbolized within the mythos. One version a lot more angelic, gentle, just kind of the holy without the madness. And one version, a version soaked in blood, a version that is the ugly truth of what a battlefield is. Yeah, so this was absolutely mental. Yeah, so that was insane. Huge thanks to Boris Dragosani for his amazing help with Norse lore. I'm sure we'll see him again. I really recommend hopping onto his channel and showing him some love. Honestly, I know what he's cooking, and guys, you have no idea. The existing video is like a good establishment of the direction, but trust me, good things are coming over there. Other than that, I want to say thank you to everybody who joined a membership or a Patreon subscription thing. You guys are the ultimate support team, and I am really grateful for it. And of course, huge shout out to our very first soundtrack scholar, Angelo Poma. Thank you so much. I shall return to my lair to work on the Dreglord video and maybe one more surprise that I got for you guys that should release pretty soon, so be on the lookout. Other than that, don't forget to hydrate, stretch, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next one.